It was the kind of revelation that Stop Talk show sets cold Sara Gilbert, the woman whose warm laughter and razor-sharp would help define daytime television for a generation, quietly shouldered a heartbreak few knew about. Behind the scenes of The Talk, behind the candid banter with friends and colleagues, lay a trauma so profound that it threatened to eclipse every on-air triumph. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the tragedy of Sara Gilbert, a story of early loss, hidden pain, and a resilience that refused to be silenced. Sara was born in Los Angeles in 1975, the youngest of two daughters to actress Barbara Cowan and Peter Bernstein, the scion of a Hollywood dynasty. On paper, it was a fairy tale pedigree red carpet premieres, silver screen parents, the promise of stardom at every turn. But the gilded world came with a fragile undercurrent. As a toddler, Sara developed a rare autoimmune condition that left her fatigued and often bedridden. Doctors struggled to diagnose her, and for months she endured invasive tests that etched worry lines into her mother's face. Barbara's career momentum ground to a halt as she became nursemaid and advocate, shuttling Sara from specialist to specialist in a frantic search for answers. That search ended with a diagnosis of juvenile idiopathic arthritis, a condition that would flare unpredictably throughout Sara's childhood, exacting a physical and emotional toll. By age 8, Sara had spent more days in hospital gowns than playgrounds. Infusions of immunosuppressants kept her arthritis at bay, but wrought side effects, brittle hair, bouts of depression, a sense of isolation as classmates sprinted past during recess. "I was the girl who stayed home," she later recalled. "Kids didn't want to play with the girl who always had needles." In voice over interviews, Sara describes learning to conceal her pain behind a practiced smile, a skill that would serve her well on sitcom sets but deepen the distance between her private struggles and public persona. Just when Sara seemed to be gaining ground in her health, a second blow struck. In 1986, her mother, Barbara Cowan, was diagnosed with breast cancer. As Barbara fought her own battle under the glare of paparazzi and tabloid speculation, Sara secretly shouldered guilt. Was her chronic illness somehow linked to her mother's? In the sterile hospital corridors, mother and daughter traded fragile strength. Barbara pressing Sara's hand before chemo treatments, Sara brushing out her mother's thinning hair with trembling fingers. Yet neither spoke aloud the fear that this time the outcome might not be so merciful. On Christmas Day 1987, Sara and her sister woke to a house heavy with hush. Barbara had lost her struggle. She slipped away surrounded by family, leaving Sara with a legacy of love stained by tragedy. The public heard nothing until obituaries praised Barbara's career and lauded her surviving husband. Sara's grief remained sealed away, too raw to share in press statements, too personal for the scripts of her next guest appearances. At just 12 years old, she became a ward of the spotlight without the family she needed. In the months after her mother's death, Sara's autoimmune flares intensified. Doctors admit that grief can trigger inflammation, and for Sara, the immune system responded to heartbreak by attacking her own joints. She spent her 13th birthday tethered to an IV pole, watching classmates' party photos on social media long before social media existed. At home, her father struggled with his own sorrow and buried himself in work, leaving Sara to navigate a maze of pain and loss with an aide as her only companion. She turned inward, finding solace in scripts and storyboards. Anything that could distract from the ache in her knees and the hollowness in her chest. It was during a minor role on a family sitcom that Sara experienced her first taste of professional triumph. Her laughter catching like sunshine on a cloudy set, producers praised her natural comedic instinct, and soon casting directors called with auditions. At 18, she landed the role of Darlene Connor on Roseanne, a part that would both define and haunt her. Darlene's cynicism and dry humor mirrored Sara's own coping mechanisms, a shield of sarcasm masking a wounded heart. As Roseanne's sweetheart turned sparring partner, she earned Emmy nominations and a chance to rewrite her own narrative. But off-camera, the pain persisted. Late night flare-ups would find her sobbing in dressing rooms while hairstylists draped capes across her sore shoulders. Still, Sara pursued her craft with fierce determination. She earned a degree in psychology to better understand trauma, and she trained in martial arts to reclaim bodily autonomy. At parties, she listened to friends' woes with a depth few expected, offering wisdom that belied her years. In interviews, she dropped hints of a dark chapter, but never named names, preserving both privacy and intrigue. When she co-created The Talk in 2010, she envisioned a platform where women could speak openly. But even there, she held her own secrets close. Today, as we examine the roots of Sara's resilience, a pattern emerges. Beneath every laughter-lined quip was a girl who learned to find light in darkness. Every shared anecdote about navigating Hollywood's pitfalls was tempered by the memory of hospital corridors and whispered prayers. The tragedy of Sara Gilbert is more than a chapter in her past. It is the crucible that forged her voice, the silence that taught her to listen, and the sorrow that empowered her to advocate for mental health awareness. In the years after Roseanne wrapped, Sara's private battles continued to shadow her public milestones. Even as she celebrated Emmy nominations and sitcom fame, the arthritis that began in childhood never fully abated. On the surface, she mastered grimaces into witty asides and managed stiff joints with custom-fitted braces. Behind the scenes, however, she endured daily physical therapy sessions, alternating between heat packs and cold compresses. Production assistants secretly stored her medical equipment in her trailer, quietly arranging schedule changes whenever a flare threatened to steal her mobility. Only her closest friends, Roseanne Barr and John Goodman among them, knew why Sara sometimes limped between wardrobe and makeup. She joked about earning every laugh one stiff knee at a time. Her stamina was a testament to fierce determination rather than sitcom magic. Around the same period, Sara confronted another serious challenge: her mental health inheritance. Studies show autoimmune disorders correlate with higher rates of depression and anxiety, and Sara was no exception. With the same courage that powered her onto television, she entered therapy. She spoke candidly about panic attacks that crept in backstage before live tapings and low-spirited days when even her trademark sarcasm felt hollow. In group sessions, she discovered an unexpected kinship with fellow survivors of childhood trauma. The listening circles she would later facilitate on The Talk owed their early format to those confidential therapy rooms, where breaking silence became the first step toward healing. Yet Sara never used her own story as fodder. She remained the empathetic host who guided others to tell theirs. Her personal life evolved alongside these efforts. In 2001, Sara began dating women for the first time, an intimately private decision that marked her emergence as a lesbian role model. She found love in the singer Linda Perry, and for a time their partnership gave her respite from the spotlight's glare. In interviews, she described how Linda encouraged her to embrace self-acceptance, both as an artist and a woman with chronic illness. But the public still fixated on tabloid gossip rather than her advocacy. When their relationship ended in 2005, Sara retreated, focusing on writing and directing projects where her camera could capture truth without demanding personal exposition. By 2010, Sara created The Talk, envisioning a show where women discussed everything from motherhood to mental health. She recruited diverse co-hosts, stalwarts like Sharon Osbourne, rising stars like Julie Chen. To ensure conversations embraced complexity, behind the cameras, Sara negotiated with executives to include a confidential segment policy, guaranteeing that guests could share intimate experiences off-air and still ask for on-screen privacy. She also established a production clause, ensuring cast members could take medical leaves without stigma, an innovation born from her own exhausted returns to work after arthritic flare-ups. These silent protections became a lifeline for staffers suffering from postpartum depression, domestic abuse, or hidden addictions. Despite her behind-the-scenes influence, Sara struggled with fertility. She longed to become a mother but faced the dual obstacles of autoimmune medication and emotional scars. In 2012, she underwent in vitro fertilization, only to endure 2 miscarriages. Each loss reopened old wounds, recalling the helplessness she felt as a child confined to hospital rooms. In collaboration with her therapist, she transformed that grief into advocacy. She joined fertility support organizations and raised funds for miscarriage research grants, leveraging her voice to amplify often silenced sorrow. Through blog posts and speaking engagements, she championed the notion that reproductive challenges need not be endured alone. Meanwhile, her health demands never ceded ground. In 2014, a particularly severe arthritis flare hospitalized her for days. News cameras swarmed outside the clinic, speculating wildly about an undisclosed mystery illness. Sara's publicist issued a terse statement: "Sara is receiving medical attention and appreciates privacy." Inside, Doctors adjusted her biopsy, tested medication regimen, and instituted a new exercise plan designed to preserve her joint function without triggering immune rebound. When she returned to the Talk studio, co-hosts greeted her with standing ovations. Sara, in turn, shared a soft smile and quipped, "I'm back, and I didn't even have to lose a Dwayne Johnson duel to get here." As the Talk entered its second decade, Sara's leadership anchored the show's evolution. She introduced mental health segments featuring child psychologists, substance abuse counselors, and legal experts on elder care, often citing her own encounters with medical systems and caregiver fatigue. She fought to secure on-air advisories directing viewers to national helplines, a detail executives once deemed overly cautious. When a guest spoke of self-harm or suicidal thoughts, Sara's off-camera signal used a simple hand gesture, prompting a commercial break and backstage support. No viewer ever knew the depth of that silent protocol, yet its presence surely saved lives. On the personal front, Sara found stability with television producer Elliot Goldner. Their 2019 wedding, an intimate ceremony in Lake Tahoe, brought together family and close friends in a clearing by the water. Sara wore a flowing ivory gown that allowed full knee mobility. Elliot donned a bespoke suit tailored for comfort. In her vows, Sara acknowledged the ache of her past, the hospital hallways, the empty cradles, the boy I didn't become, and pledged her love to Elliot's steady companionship. Their marriage became another sanctuary where medical appointments and therapy sessions were shared responsibilities rather than burdens borne alone. Today, Sara Gilbert stands as a testament to layered resilience. She continues to produce and occasionally host The Talk, now a platform renowned for compassionate coverage of health, family, and social justice. She chairs boards for arthritis research and LGBTQ youth centers, guiding policy decisions with the insight of lived experience. Most importantly, she has embraced the paradox of her journey that tragedy need not define destiny, but can forge the compassion to heal others. In every laugh shared on set and every tear wiped away in prairie towns where she visits support groups, Sara's quiet courage echoes. The tragedy of Sara Gilbert is indeed sad, but its true legacy is a life devoted to elevating voices so that no one endures hidden pain in silence. Even as Sara Gilbert's career blossomed, she carried the invisible scars of her early trials, a silent companion at every triumph. In 2020, when The Talk celebrated its 10th anniversary, the network offered Sara a new contract to remain the show's face indefinitely. On the surface, it was a dream come true: bigger salary, creative control, the comfort of familiar studio lights. Yet behind her measured yes lay a hesitant heart. The COVID lockdown had intensified her isolation, reviving memories of solo hospital nights and an aching loneliness that once threatened to eclipse her spirit. When cameras cut for the day, Sara found herself replaying dark thoughts in her mind, questioning her worth beyond the persona she projected. Recognizing the danger, Sara made a startling decision. She announced her departure from The Talk in early 2022, choice that stunned co-hosts and viewers alike. The reaction was immediate. Social feeds flooded with tributes, tearful hashtags like #FitThankSara trended, and industry insiders speculated about drama. But the reality was far more nuanced. Sara knew that to sustain her both mentally and physically, she needed to step out of the relentless public glare. She recalled the fiery flare of 2014 and the months of therapy that followed. She refused to risk another breakdown by clinging to a schedule that left no margin for rest. Her exit episode became a watershed moment. Gone were the witty quips and carefully crafted segments. Instead, she spoke from the heart, voice faltering as she reflected on years of vulnerability disguised as humor. Viewers watched, transfixed, as she recounted the hospital hallways of her youth and the strength she found in laughter. At the episode's close, she hugged her co-hosts, her chosen sisters, and whispered a private thanks that no mic could fully capture. In that moment, Sara gifted the audience not a performance, but a shared release, the permission to let go, and to cherish new beginnings amid endings. With her airtime now open, Sara embarked on a journey of self-discovery. She moved to a slower pace, renting a lakeside cabin where sunrise meant audio journaling instead of early call sheets. There, she developed a podcast series titled Echoes in the Silence, inviting guests to share stories of hidden trauma and survival. The show's first season featured voices like Stevie Nicks, who spoke candidly about grief, and Michelle Obama, who offered strategies for healing in the public eye. Sara's empathetic interviewing style, honed over decades on television, revealed layers of emotional intelligence that surprised even veteran listeners. The podcast became a sanctuary for both host and audience, a testament to her belief that healing thrives where stories find space to breathe. As the podcast soared in popularity, Sara turned her attention to production. She greenlit documentaries exploring the intersections of chronic illness and creativity, funding projects such as Arthritic Canvas, which followed painters whose joints rebelled yet refused to silence their art. She established mini-grants for independent filmmakers from marginalized communities, insisting on a blind application process to ensure talent eclipsed credentials. Under her guidance, these films premiered at festivals from Sundance to Cannes, winning awards for authenticity and raw storytelling. For Sara, every frame carried more weight than any sitcom punchline. Each film was a testament to Liv's persevering in the face of invisibility. Meanwhile, Sara's marriage to Elliot deepened. Together, they navigated publishing her first memoir, Silent Bruises, Open Hearts, which wove her personal history with reflections on resilience. The book debuted on bestseller lists, not for scandalous revelations, but for its quiet honesty, a style Sara honed by learning that authenticity need not be sensational to be powerful. They launched a book tour that balanced bookstore stops with intimate living room readings, ensuring that Sara never spent more than 6 consecutive days away from her body's therapy needs. At each event, she met readers whose own struggles mirrored her chapters, reinforcing her mission. Shared truth can transform isolation into solidarity. Through these next chapters, Sara Gilbert's journey remained defined by contrasts, visibility and privacy, laughter and tears, strength and vulnerability. The tragedy she endured became both a source of creative fuel and a shield guiding her choices. By setting boundaries at work, by amplifying voices in the shadows, and by inviting the world into her own ongoing recovery, she rewrote the narrative of pain, transforming it into a bridge that connected hearts across screens and stages. In every step she takes now, Sara carries forward the lessons of her own past. She listens, she protects, she empowers. Her laughter still echoes across screens, but it is informed by silence and strength. In Sara Gilbert's life, tragedy became the catalyst for compassion, a torch lighting the way for others to shine, and boldly shine. From the moment she closed the pages of her memoir, Sara Gilbert recognized that her next task was to transform personal insight into collective action. In 2023, she and Elliot launched the Gilbert Cares Foundation, dedicated to supporting those living with chronic illness and trauma. Their inaugural initiative was the Open Hearts Weekend, a free retreat held at a lakeside conference center in Northern California. Hundreds of attendees, some in wheelchairs, some grappling with anxiety, arrived uncertain what to expect. Over 3 days, Sara led guided art therapy sessions where participants painted abstract landscapes of pain and hope, while mental health professionals facilitated group circles for sharing stories. Medical volunteers offered joint mobility workshops modeled after her own therapy routines. By the final evening's campfire, strangers embraced as friends, their tears mingling with laughter under the redwood canopy. Sara watched from a low wooden bench, her own hands still bearing flecks of acrylic paint. Here her tragedy became a living bridge connecting isolated hearts. In parallel, Gilbert Cares partnered with the Arthritis Foundation to launch a scholarship program for young artists whose physical limitations might otherwise silence their talent. Selected students received stipends to buy adaptive tools, brushes that clip onto quivering fingers, easels set at wheelchair-friendly angles, digital tablets programmed for limited range motions. Sara personally reviewed every application and traveled to meet recipients in their hometown studios. A 16-year-old in Detroit who once abandoned painting after painful wrist flares sent Sara a video of her latest self-portrait, a bold rendering of desert cacti against a fiery sky. Sara responded with an impromptu video message: "Your perseverance outshines any discomfort. Keep painting the world true." That encouragement became the foundation's anthem. Art as reclamation, resilience as creation. Meanwhile, Sara and Elliot refined their production company, Resilience Films, focusing on documentaries that explore human endurance. Their first feature, Invisible Battles, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival to critical acclaim. It wove together the stories of 5 individuals: a firefighter recovering from PTSD, a marathon runner with lupus, a caregiver for a dementia patient, a single mother facing postpartum depression, and a young actor who lost his hearing. Sara served as on-screen guide, her empathy cutting through each subject's isolation as she recorded candid conversations. Critics praised her nuanced direction, noting how her own history allowed her to ask unguarded questions that coaxed raw truths. At the gala reception, Sara accepted the Audience Choice Award, dedicating it to all the invisible warriors who fight daily just to be here. Back in the television world, Sara made occasional cameo appearances on reboots of her past shows. In 2024, she appeared in an episode of The Connors, returning as Darlene Connor in a storyline about a neighbor diagnosed with arthritis. The arc, co-written by Sara herself, depicted Darlene navigating injections, joint swelling, and workplace adjustments. Critics lauded the episode's authenticity and emotional impact, praising Sara for using fiction to mirror her own life. In interviews, she emphasized that entertainment can be both healing and instructive. If someone watching feels less alone, every ounce of flare-up pain was worth it. Education also remained a passion. Sara accepted a visiting professorship at a major university school of cinematic arts, teaching a seminar titled Trauma and Expression in Film. Each week, students screened clips from Resilience films, dissected narrative strategies, and interviewed guest speakers struggling with various conditions. Sara introduced techniques for working around physical limitations, shot lists optimized to reduce fatigue, scheduling that built-in rest periods, camera rigs that required minimal manual adjustment. Her syllabus became required reading in several film programs nationwide, amplifying her influence on the next generation of storytellers. On the advocacy front, Sara testified before Congress to advocate for expanded mental health coverage in public insurance programs. Her testimony referenced her own costly treatment journey, years of therapy, medication regimens that lacked adequate coverage, and the financial unpredictability of long-term care. Lawmakers responded by introducing the Gilbert Mental Wellness Act, proposing federal grants to train more specialized counselors and to subsidize co-pays for chronic illness patients. While the bill faced hurdles in committee, Sara's presence elevated the conversation, ensuring that policy debates included human voices rather than abstract numbers. Even at home, Sara and Elliot deepened their rituals of care. Now parents to a rescue dog named Luna, they adapted their morning routines to include brief nature walks, mindful stretches, and gratitude sharing over herbal tea. Their Lake Tahoe cabin, once a solitude retreat, became a pilot gathering spot for young foundation staff planning the next community project. Sara kept a simple whiteboard hung by her desk, listing ongoing foundation goals: expand retreat to the East Coast, produce a mini-series on caregiver burnout, launch scholarship for disabled filmmakers. Each item carried the weight of her own past, grounded in the promise that small acts of compassion can spark profound change. Looking back, Sara Gilbert's arc emerges as a testament to the alchemy of grief and grace. Her childhood pain, her heartbreak over loss, her battles with body and mind. They did not define her defeats but became the raw materials for building empathy-driven enterprises. From her laughter, bombshell delivery of sitcom lines to her gentle hosting of silent struggle circles, she exemplifies how vulnerability can translate into leadership. Sara's tragedy remains a somber thread in her tapestry of life, but it is interwoven with community, creativity, and compassion. And for every person standing in a hospital hallway or facing sleepless nights of anxiety, Sara's journey whispers, "You are not alone, your story matters, and through shared wounds, we can find shared strength." In the months that followed the Foundation's first retreats and documentary successes, Sara and Elliot turned their attention to digital outreach. Eager to meet people where they already lived online, they launched the Gilbert Cares app, a free platform combining guided meditation for chronic pain management, peer-to-peer support forums, and expert-led video workshops on adaptive art techniques. Each tutorial, everything from watercolor grips to voice exercises for speech therapy, was created in collaboration with participants from the Open Hearts Weekend. Sara insisted on including real testimonials. One user's post described how a 10-minute guided stretch video finally brought relief during a late-night flare, while another shared an adaptive yoga sequence that helped restore wrist mobility. The app's download numbers climbed steadily, but more important than metrics was the flood of gratitude-filled messages people wrote. "I feel seen. I finally have a plan." And "Thank you for building this lifeline." Building on that momentum, Resilience Films debuted a web series called Canvas of Courage, featuring 6 emerging artists living with invisible conditions. Episodes were short, 10 minutes each, designed to fit between work breaks or commutes. Viewers watched an abstract painter with fibromyalgia describe the way colors still danced on her canvas despite wrist braces, and a spoken-word poet with bipolar disorder share a poem composed during a late-night manic episode. Sara's interview style, soft, toned questions, patient pauses, genuine nods created space for raw honesty. Social media campaigns paired each episode with a signature hashtag like FayFibroBrush and FefManiaverse, inviting audiences to share their own creations inspired by the stories. Community response turned each tag into a threaded gallery, transforming isolated accounts into shared celebration. Sara often checked the feeds herself, bookmarking stories of connection and occasionally replying, "Your art shines through every challenge." Meanwhile, the Gilbert Cares Foundation worked with academic partners to launch the Invisible Voices lecture series at universities across the country. Sara and Elliot handpicked speakers whose expertise spanned neurology, psychology, art theory, and social work. At each event, a student volunteer read anonymous notes from attendees struggling with chronic illness or grief. Then the guest expert framed strategies to translate those struggles into creative or practical outlets. Discussion panels explored topics like rewriting your body's narrative, examining how language shapes perception of pain, designing empathy-driven technologies, imagining future tools that respond to emotional as well as physical needs. Sara moderated every session, weaving in her own reflections. "I learned that even when you can't move, your mind can still move mountains." On the philanthropic side, Sara negotiated partnerships with major health insurers to integrate the Gilbert Cares app into care plans for chronic disease management. Insurers piloted the app among rheumatoid arthritis clients, offering subsidized access to classes on ergonomic living and adaptive cooking. Early outcomes were promising. Participants reported a 25% reduction in emergency room visits and a 40% improvement in self-reported quality of life measures. Hospitals in 4 states adopted the program, assigning digital navigators to help patients personalize exercises and connect with online support groups. Sara marked each new adoption with a handwritten note to the hospital director, an act of personal accountability that staff described as or heard of from a celebrity. As the app and web series gained traction, Resilience Films expanded its scope into virtual reality. Their Painscape VR experience immersed users in environments that visualized different types of chronic pain, from the burning swirl of neuropathy to the crushing weight of arthritis. Medical students, caregivers, and friends of those with chronic conditions used the simulation to cultivate empathy and learn coping strategies. Each Painscape session ended with a guided de-escalation routine, soft soundscapes, gentle animated visuals, and Sara's voice offering reassurance. Early research showed that users emerged with a deeper understanding of invisible illness and a lower score on the Burnout Compassion assessment. University hospitals integrated Painscape into caregiver training programs, and Sara herself attended the installations to observe reactions firsthand. While all these initiatives flourished, Sara remained grounded in her own self-care routines. She and Elliot hired a rotating team of assistants to manage scheduling, so she never exceeded prescribed daily therapy limits. When travel became necessary for speaking engagements or retreats, they chartered quieter accommodations, small guest houses rather than grand hotels, and maintained rigid rest-to-work ratios, at least 2 downtime hours for every 1 hour of programming. Elliot crafted a daily pause ritual, signaling by tapping a small brass bell hung by Sara's bedside, reminding her to step away from screens and stretch, journal, or simply breathe. These micro-rhythms became vital to sustaining her creativity and well-being. In early 2025, Sara accepted an invitation to deliver the keynote at the World Health Innovation Summit. Her address, a blend of personal testimony and strategic vision, outlined how global health systems could embed narrative medicine, adaptive creativity, and digital empathy tools into standard practice. She concluded with a simple declaration: "Healing happens when we acknowledge both the wounds we see and the ones we don't." The standing ovation that followed was not just for her words, but for the trauma-turned-purpose that fueled them. Networking events afterward buzzed with commitments to pilot Gilbert Cares programs in Canada, Australia, and the UK. Sara fielded each request with gratitude, mindful not to overextend beyond her physical and emotional compass. Through every venture, app development, remote retreats, VR empathy labs. Sara Gilbert continued to honor her earliest lessons that tragedy can catalyze connection, that creative expression can unlock resilience, and that even the most hidden pain deserves a stage. As Section 5 draws to a close, her journey reminds us that lasting impact often emerges not from grand gestures alone, but from the steady accumulation of small acts of care, innovation, and unwavering heart. Sara's journey didn't end with app downloads or festival laurels. Every milestone invited fresh questions. How could she reach communities without internet access? Which partnerships might bridge the gap between technology and rural isolation? In response, the Gilbert Cares team piloted mobile wellness vans stocked with tablets, art supplies, and teletherapy booths. Parked outside clinics and recreation centers, these bright vehicles offered both digital and hands-on relief, ensuring that even those without personal devices could join the conversation about resilience and recovery. Meanwhile, Sara remained intimately involved in every new venture, not just as a figurehead but as a hands-on innovator. She spent weekends alongside engineers refining adjustable easels for standing or seated use, testing prototypes in local community art centers. On another morning, she reviewed user feedback summaries at the Foundation's downtown office, her pen circling phrases like "feels understood" and "finally helpful." Those phrases became her guiding mantra, reminding her that purpose is found not in accolades, but in moments of genuine connection. Across borders, the Gilbert Cares model inspired replicas in distant regions. In rural India, an NGO launched Echoes of Hope clinics, modeled on Sara's retreats, combining Ayurvedic pain management with storytelling workshops. In Brazil, a coalition of filmmakers produced a mini documentary series focused on Afro-Brazilian communities coping with sickle cell disease, drawing narrative structure directly from Resilience Film's empathetic style. Each adaptation honored Sara's original mission while evolving to meet local needs, proof that her framework of creativity, compassion, and community had universal resonance. Art spaces became sanctuaries for those seeking both expression and relief. Galleries in New York, London, and Tokyo hosted Invisible No More exhibitions, curating works by artists with chronic conditions. Each piece carried an accompanying narrative plaque, quoting Sara's own words, "Your struggle is part of your story, not its ending." Visitors reported experiencing profound shifts in perspective, recognizing that art can serve as a bridge between body and soul, transforming pain into collective empathy. Education continued to be a cornerstone of Sara's legacy. The Gilbert Cares Academy expanded its online masterclasses into accredited certificate programs, partnering with universities to offer continuing education credits. Topics range from adaptive cinematography to trauma-informed leadership, and from narrative medicine to cartography of chronic pain. Students emerged equipped not only with practical skills, but with an ethical framework rooted in Sara's belief that innovation must always honor human dignity. In policy circles, Sara's advocacy bore fruit. After years of testimony and coalition building, the Gilbert Mental Wellness Act passed into law in several states, guaranteeing coverage for telehealth consultations and subsidizing adaptive creative therapies. Hospitals restructured patient care models to include creative arts liaisons, professionals trained to integrate painting, music, or writing exercises into rehabilitation protocols. Insurance companies adopted coverage tiers that recognized quality of life interventions as essential rather than elective. A paradigm shift driven in part by Sara's relentless campaigning. Despite these sweeping changes, Sara never lost sight of the individual moments that first ignited her mission: the teenager painting under paint, splattered tutelage, the caregiver learning to navigate grief through digital journaling, the student whose life was transformed by a VR simulation of chronic pain. She continued to visit support groups in person, sitting quietly as participants shared their darkest struggles. In those spaces, she offered no pithy slogans, only attentive presence and the occasional gentle question that encouraged deeper reflection. As the 5th anniversary of the Foundation approached, Sara and Elliot hosted a global webcast titled Threads of Resilience. It wove together stories from every corner of their network: a Syrian refugee painting her first self-portrait, a retired teacher in Canada writing poetry at last, a young inventor in South Africa building a synesthetic lamp for migraine relief. The webcast served as both celebration and call to action, inviting viewers to plant seeds of care in their own communities. In the week that followed, social media lit up with faith threads of resilience, pledges, and photos of local initiatives inspired by Sara's work. In private, Sara remained committed to the simple rituals that sustained her through decades of challenges. Each dawn found her scribbling gratitude lists in a leather-bound journal, her entries balancing professional objectives with personal acknowledgments. Thank you for the support of my partner. Thank you for an attic studio with morning light. Thank you for hands that still create. Evenings belong to family. Quiet dinners with Elliot, long walks with Luna the dog, and evenings reading letters from those whose lives had been touched by Gilbert cares. Now, as Sara looks toward the horizon of her next chapter, her vision is clear: a world where no one faces invisible battles alone, where technology and tenderness coalesce in equal measure, and where every act of creativity becomes an act of healing. Her own tragedy remains neither a footnote nor a burden, but the crucible that forged a movement of empathy, innovation, and enduring hope. In that living legacy, Sara Gilbert invites us all to imagine how our private struggles might become catalysts for collective strength, one compassionate connection at a time.